Women really hate it when you do these five things. During sex, most men never realize that in the most private moments of a relationship, attraction is not just built on desire, but on awareness, timing, and emotional intelligence. And according to intimacy coaches who have spent years studying real couple behavior, there are small but powerful mistakes men repeat in bed that quietly destroy a woman's experience without her ever saying it out loud. And if someone is hearing this thinking they already understand women in intimacy, that is exactly where the problem begins. Because what feels normal to a man is often completely different from what a woman is experiencing internally. And that gap is where confusion, dissatisfaction, and emotional distance slowly grows. And this is why a video like this carries such an uncomfortable truth that many men would rather ignore, because it challenges the belief that experience alone is enough when in reality, awareness is what creates real connection. It usually starts with a claim that sounds bold, almost provocative, like the idea that there are five things women secretly hate during sex, but rarely say out loud. Not because they are mysterious or complicated, but because for generations, most women were never encouraged to openly talk about pleasure in a clear and confident way. And even today, many still hesitate to guide their partner out of fear of hurting his ego or creating awkwardness, which means in silence. Misunderstandings repeat themselves across millions of relationships, and men continue doing things thinking everything is fine, while the emotional reality on the other side is very different. And that silent gap is what makes this topic so important, not as judgment, but as awareness. In conversations about intimacy, experts like Magda Kay, an intimacy coach and tantra teacher who has worked with couples worldwide, often emphasize that most issues in bed are not about skill, but about timing, pressure, and emotional safety. And she explains that when a woman feels safe and understood, her body responds very differently compared to when she feels rushed or misunderstood. And this idea becomes the foundation for everything that follows because the first mistake begins exactly there in how men approach touch too early and too intensely. The first mistake is when stimulation is applied too strongly and too soon, especially in sensitive moments where the body is still adjusting. Because what many men do not realize is that female arousal is not immediate. It is gradual and deeply connected to relaxation, trust, and emotional presence. So when intensity arrives too quickly, instead of pleasure, it often creates resistance in the body, almost like a defense mechanism, where muscles tighten instead of soften. And instead of opening up, the body becomes guarded. And what was meant to feel good can actually interrupt the natural buildup of pleasure, making it harder to reach any deeper level of satisfaction. And from a psychological point of view, this happens because the nervous system reads sudden intensity as pressure rather than comfort, which is why pacing matters more than force. And in real relationships, this often shows up as a disconnect where one partner feels they are doing more, but the other feels they are not ready yet, even if they never say it directly. The second mistake is skipping what is casually called foreplay. But in reality, this is not a warm up for her. It is the main experience itself. And this is where many misunderstandings begin. Because while men are often conditioned to see intimacy as something that moves toward a single event, many women experience intimacy as a slow, emotional, and physical unfolding that requires time to fully arrive in their body. And when that process is rushed or minimized, it can feel like being emotionally skipped over, even if physically everything is happening. And this is why experts often say that what men consider foreplay is actually already the main phase for her, meaning she often needs even more preparation just to reach the same emotional state. And that preparation is not just physical, but mental, because stress, thoughts, and daily pressure all sit in the body, and without enough time to release those layers, true relaxation does not happen. And in real life, this can look like a woman going along with the moment, but feeling mentally distant. Not because she is uninterested, but because her body has not been given enough space to fully arrive. And when that space is not respected consistently, over time it can create emotional withdrawal from intimacy altogether. The third mistake is something that often goes unnoticed by men because it happens after their own experience peaks. And that is the moment everything suddenly stops right after ejaculation. And while from a male perspective, this feels like the natural end of the act, for many women, it feels completely different. because female arousal does not always follow the same sharp rise and fall pattern. Instead, it can build slowly and sometimes continues even after the man is finished. And in that moment of sudden emotional and physical disconnection, many women can feel left in a state of unfinished energy, almost like being dropped out of a shared experience too quickly. And on a psychological level, this is important because intimacy is not only physical, but also deeply emotional. And during sexual connection, the body releases bonding hormones that create a sense of closeness and attachment. So when that connection is suddenly cut off, it can unintentionally feel like emotional distance or withdrawal, even if no harm is intended. And over time, this repeated pattern can subtly affect how emotionally safe a woman feels in intimacy. Because what she experiences is not just the act itself, but the feeling of what happens immediately after it ends. The fourth mistake is putting pressure on her to orgasm. And this is where good intentions often backfire the most, because many men believe that asking questions or encouraging her experience is supportive. But when those moments become repeated expectations, the experience slowly shifts from pleasure to performance, and the woman becomes aware that she is being measured rather than being felt. And psychologically, this activates pressure in the mind. And pressure is one of the fastest ways to disconnect a person from their body because instead of relaxing into sensation, the attention shifts into thinking about outcomes. And in that state, orgasm becomes harder, not easier, and even phrases that are meant to be exciting can start to feel like pressure when they are tied to expectation rather than presence. And what many men do not realize is that intimacy is not a goal to be completed, but an experience to be shared. And when it becomes a task, the emotional quality of it changes completely, often leaving the woman feeling like her experience is secondary to performance, which naturally reduces openness over time. The fifth mistake is assuming that you already know what she likes. And this is one of the most subtle but powerful issues in relationships because it is often built on past experience, confidence, or comparison. But human desire is not fixed or identical across people, and even within the same person, it can change depending on mood, stress, hormones, emotional state, and relationship dynamics. So, what worked before is never a guaranteed formula. And when a man assumes certainty, he unknowingly removes curiosity from the connection, and without curiosity, communication weakens. And without communication, misunderstandings grow silently. And in many real situations, women do not openly correct or guide their partner because they fear creating discomfort or rejection. So instead, they adapt quietly, sometimes accepting experiences they do not fully enjoy, which creates a hidden emotional cost over time. And this is why the most important shift is not technique but openness. Because when a man asks, listens, and adjusts without ego, the entire dynamic changes, and the woman no longer feels like she has to guess or suppress her preferences. She feels safe enough to express them. And that safety is often what defines long term attraction more than anything else. When all of these patterns are looked at together, a clear psychological picture starts to form, showing that most issues in intimacy are not about lack of attraction or lack of desire, but about misalignment in timing, emotional awareness, and communication. And the surprising truth is that small changes in attention can completely transform the experience because when a woman feels that her body is respected, her pace is understood, her emotional state is considered, and her voice matters, her level of openness naturally increases, and intimacy becomes something deeper than just physical interaction. It becomes a shared emotional space where both people feel seen. And this is why experts often emphasize that becoming a better lover is not about learning tricks, but about unlearning assumptions, because every woman is different. And even the same woman is different from one day to the next, influenced by stress, connection, hormones, and emotional context, which means the only reliable approach is presence, not prediction, and curiosity, not control. In many real relationships, the difference between frustration and fulfillment is not dramatic changes, but small adjustments, slowing down when needed, listening more carefully, staying connected after intimacy instead of disconnecting, removing pressure around outcomes and staying open instead of assuming certainty. And when these shifts happen consistently, something powerful changes in the relationship dynamic because intimacy stops feeling like a routine and starts feeling like a shared emotional experience again. And what makes this understanding even more important is that most women will not directly complain about these things, not because they do not matter, but because they often prioritize emotional harmony over confrontation, which means silence is not agreement, it is adaptation. And that adaptation can slowly reduce excitement over time if nothing changes. So awareness becomes the responsibility of the partner who is willing to understand more deeply. The message behind all of this is not criticism, it is clarity. Because when men understand what actually affects a woman's experience in intimacy, everything becomes simpler, not more complicated, and connection becomes more natural instead of forced. And over time, this awareness creates a kind of trust that is far more powerful than any technique or performance because it tells her that she is not just part of an experience, she is being truly understood within it. And once this level of understanding is reached, intimacy stops being about trying to do things right and starts becoming about feeling things right. And that shift alone is often what transforms an ordinary connection into something deeply memorable, stable, and emotionally satisfying for both people involved.